Spiritual warfare is not theatrical, it is cognitive. The forming of who you are is not accidental, it is cumulative. So discernment is not optional. If this episode confronted you, sit with it. If it clarified something, act on it. Discern the voice, submit to the Spirit, govern yourself. I'm John Diomede, and this is The Voice in the Reckoning. If you would like to contact me, use the email on my website, voiceinreckoning.com, to review our resources and reach out directly. Don't forget to follow us and to turn on notifications so you don't miss any episodes. There is a noise in your head. It's not neutral. It's not composed of a single source. Most people never question the voice they follow, but what you agree with internally will shape your life. This is where discernment begins and reckoning is discovered. Welcome to the Voice in the Reckoning podcast. I am John Diomede. Welcome to episode 1, part 4, The Voice of the Holy Spirit. There are a couple of housekeeping tasks that we need to get out of the way before we get into the episode. One is, do people hear from God? Most of the time in the secular world, and even sometimes in the religious world, people who hear from God are considered crazy, or people who hear from God are doing crazy things. And fortunately, hearing from God is possible. Unfortunately, discerning that it is the voice of the Holy Spirit is the challenge, hence these episodes. The other housekeeping chore that I need to get out of the way has to do with my colleagues who would say, who would ask me, do you really think the Holy Spirit speaks to individuals that are not regenerated, or in religious terminology, not born again? And my answer is yes, God does, because if God didn't speak to them, he'd be a pretty powerless God. The difference in their mind, and it's a real difference, but they have to give God a little more credit than they do. The most important point to keep in mind is that God does speak to everybody. Everybody does not know how to discern that it is God's voice, but this episode should help a lot with that. And then there are the people whom I refer to as regenerated. Again, religious speak says born again. Regenerated people actually invite the Holy Spirit to live with them. This is a biblical foundation. Jesus said that the Holy Spirit would live in us and that he would reside in us. Jesus said that we would know it. He said the world would not know it, hence the doubt of the secular community. But he said you would know it. And anyone who has the voice of the Holy Spirit in the area of regeneration should be able to hear that voice and decipher it from the other four. They may not be able to divide it the way I'm dividing it, but they should be able to do that. So I need to get those two housekeeping portions out of the way. And now I wanted to start to speak about the voice of the Holy Spirit. I'm trying to keep this as basic as possible. The voice of the Holy Spirit is a voice that you have to wait for. Most of the time, the other three voices, the voice of self, the voice of the world, and the voice of the demonic, are shouting and speaking at a fast pace. The voice of the Holy Spirit is not like that. The voice of the Holy Spirit is a voice that you need to wait on, that you need to camp out on. And the reason why is because the Holy Spirit differentiates himself from the other voices by meeting you at your level. For example, take the emotion anger. The voice of the world has people exhibit the emotion of anger with violence, with vitriol, with hate, with unforgiveness, with lack of compassion. But the voice of the Holy Spirit combats those voices 100% of the time. There is one resolution when anger takes place as an emotion inside the human being in terms of the message of the voice of the Holy Spirit, and that is forgiveness. Forgiveness in life is something like this. It's about losing the battle to win the war. God is interested in the final outcome. So God is willing to sacrifice, hence the cross of the Messiah. God is willing to sacrifice the battle to win the war. The result of this sacrifice and this local loss always produces restoration. And that's one of the wonderful things about the voice of the Holy Spirit. The voice of the Holy Spirit brings restoration. He does not bring continued anger. The Holy Spirit does not bring confusion or manipulation. The Holy Spirit brings wisdom. And wisdom is not always easy to recognize, but the Holy Spirit does bring that wisdom, and that wisdom should settle you down and should help to restore you. So forgiveness is a very crucial element in this process. When the Holy Spirit speaks to the unregenerated soul, and he does so in the sense that the person needs to develop maturity as a part of this relationship. The relationship has to develop maturity. So the unregenerated soul receives gentle correction, receives incremental truth, and the unregenerated soul receives measured conviction. The reason is because there's always a sense of forgiveness and compassion in the voice of the Holy Spirit when it comes to the unregenerated soul. When we talk about the regenerated soul and the maturing believer, there is an increase in reckoning. There is an increase, deepening of accountability, and and conviction becomes very sharp. It is not condemnation, it is conviction. And as the individual matures, these become deeper and deeper, so the individual can begin to correct behavior, but to correct behavior in a way that it lasts, the changing of the lifestyle. Otherwise, if the Spirit rushed to treating everyone the same, he would crush the immature. I have grandchildren under the age of 2, and each one of them we treat very differently than the 13-year-old and the 11-year-old, because the immaturity of the younger one needs to be caressed a little bit more. And this is the voice of the Holy Spirit. This is the way the Holy Spirit works. The Spirit does not accuse identity, because identity is something that has to develop over time. These are some of the things that the Spirit would move on individuals to do in a very gentle way. To correct behavior, to avoid isolation, to be restored in a sense of confidence, to understand the difference between truth and manipulated data. The Spirit does not shout over the world, but the Spirit waits until the individual is in a position to hear the voice that would stand directly against the voice of the world. The other part that is paramount in terms of hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit is the idea of submission. If you have a regenerated individual, submission becomes more and more required. The Holy Spirit will not compete with the chaos of the world. He will invite you to surrender when you are ready. And all of those brings benefit. The benefit of restoration, the benefit of the journey toward completeness. You will hear much more of the Holy Spirit in later episodes. But for now, this just gives you the idea that the Holy Spirit does speak to people. Listen for the voice of the Holy Spirit. Not every voice in your mind should lead. Discern the source before you release the thought. The wrong agreement leads to regrettable choices in life. The correct agreement leads to reckoning. This is The Voice and Reckoning. Have a good day. For more information, visit our website, voiceandreckoning.com. To contact me, use the email address on that site. Spiritual warfare is not theatrical, it's cognitive. Formation is not accidental, it's cumulative. And discernment is not optional. If this episode confronted you, sit with it. If it clarified something, act on it. Discern the voice submit to the Spirit, govern yourself. I am John Diomede, and this is The Voice and the Reckoning. If you would like to contact me, use the email on my website, voiceandreckoning.com, to review our resources and reach out directly.